Okay, so I did not make a video. Let me get this microphone over here. I did not make a video for yesterday, but what we learned yesterday was that when we multiply, that one negative flips once, or flips the sign once, and what happens is your positive number changes into a negative number. So if we had -7 times 3, you would do the 21 like we had, but we would recognize that we have one sign flip right there, which makes it a -21. That if I had 2 times -5, we would still do the 2 times 5 to get 10, but we have one sign flip right there, which makes it a -10. We then also learned that 2 negatives flips the sign twice. And so as a result, again, if you go from, again, this says if we start positive and flip it once, it becomes negative. Well, 2 flips is I started out positive, I flip it once, it turns negative, I flip it twice, guess what? It goes back to positive. So the general idea was that one negative, because it flips once, is going to make it negative. 2 negatives is going to flip it twice, which just flips it back to where it was, because we're talking about a coin here again. So you have just a pad here, but again, if I flip this once, it turns it over to be opposite. If I flip it twice, it turns it right back to where it belongs. So your 2 negatives just turns it right back to where it was. So what we saw was if we had something like -4 times -5, yes, the 20 is still going to happen because of 4 times 5, but you have 2 sign flips here that make it +20. And you don't need to put the plus, but that's just the idea. And that if I had -6 times -10, again, the 6 times 10 is still going to be 60, but the 2 sign flips is what makes this a +60. And again, you don't need to put the positive on it, but that's the general idea. So today we are moving on to dividing integers, and I just want you to take a look, considering what we just talked about here, and look at these solutions here on dividing and see if anything looks different to you. On A, again, part of what, and this is from the book, part of what we're doing is trying to learn how to use the book to kind of see what's going on. So it gives a solution here. This is -24 divided by -4, and the answer that they give is +6. This is -36 divided by 3, and the answer that they give is -12. Well, 36 divided by 3 is 12, but it's a -12. And then on C, which is a review from before with negatives, you have 2/3 divided by -5/4, which, as they will show, you copy the 2/3, you change this into multiplication, and then you flip. Remember, you take the reciprocal of that, which is why they have -4/5. But the bottom line is, yes, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 5 is 15, but notice it is a -8/15. And so consider the rules that we just set up here in multiplication. 1 negative pretty much makes it negative. 2 negatives makes it positive. And what you should notice is that it follows the same rule. This is 2 negatives, it's positive. This is 1 negative, it's negative. There's 1 negative number, it's negative. So the general rule for division is, again, same thing. 1 negative is negative, and 2 negatives is positive. I mean, it's that simple. Same as multiplication. If you multiply 2 things or you divide 2 things, count the negative signs, not the number. Don't view this as a -4, but view this as 1 negative sign and 2 negative signs, which is why we have 2 flips, which makes it a +6. So moving forward on that, we're just going to work these out real fast. And again, using the rules that we know, if we're looking at A and we have -18 over -6, that means that we're looking again at -18 divided by -6. That line there just means divided by. We know that 18 divided by 6, if you're talking about how many times 6 goes into 18, you've got 6, which is 1 step, 12, which is 2 steps, 18, which is 3 steps, so it'll be 3. The question is, what type of 3 will it be? And that's where we have to go to our rule. This is 1, 2 negatives, which means it's going to be a +3. Again, 1 negative looks like that, 2 negative, it just stacks on top and becomes a plus. On B, -48 divided by 3. Well, first off, let's do the division thing and see if we can get it. We know that 3 goes into 4 once with 1 left over. We know that 3 goes into 18 6 times. The question is, what type of 16 is it? And so that's where we again have to look. How many negative signs do we see? I see 1. And what we just learned again about the rules of division is that 1 negative flips it once, making it negative. On C, we have 3/5 divided by negative 1/2. First thing we want to do is change this to the form we need, because remember, we do not know how to divide. So we turn that into 3/5 times, parentheses, negative 2 over 1. Now we work this out. So again, when we work this out, we go across the top, which is 6. We go across the bottom, which is 5. But the main question in the end is it a positive or a negative 6 over 5? And again, you have a positive 3/5. You have a negative 2 over 1. That means it's going to be a negative 6/5. It's going to be a negative answer. And I took off the example on the opening problem, but this is a problem that we can do, mainly because if you're talking about fractions and whole numbers, and again, this is something we're eventually going to get into, negative 4 over 9 has to be divided by a fraction. Well, what is a whole number as a fraction? Well, a fraction means divide. And so what you do if you have a whole number you want to turn into a fraction is you just put it over 1, because 8 divided by 1 is 8. Now, again, we didn't change it yet because we had to rewrite the 8. So our first step was to rewrite the 8. Our second step is to actually solve it. So it's negative 4 over 9 times, again, we don't write this the way we see it, 1 over 8. Which now becomes negative 4 over 9. I'm silly. 4 on top, 72 on the bottom. And again, now you want to count your negatives. Well, there's one negative here, so it's going to be negative 4 over 72. But the trick here is both of these numbers are even, which means we can cut them in half. Actually, we can cut it in half twice. It'll be negative 2 over, and just trust me here, 36. But both of those numbers are even, which means it reduces to be negative 1 over 18. Would you expect to do all that? Eventually, but not right now. Right now, just make sure you understand how to get from here to here, again, by taking a whole number and simply putting a 1 over it, and then how to change this problem into that problem and work your way out. The simplifying part isn't going to kill you, but again, you want to make sure you know what's going on. Part of the reason why we're doing all this stuff and why we're pushing you so hard is because we need to be able to solve realistic problems. So in this problem here, it says calculate a total golf score. Professional golfer finished 7 strokes under par, which is a negative 7 for each of 3 days of a tournament. What was her total score for the tournament? So what we're looking at here is you're looking to try to figure out a total score, even though it's not really totals and like add up, because it doesn't always mean that. You just want to know what the golfer scored. But what you have here is that their score on one day was negative 7. And then it says each day, which means that every day it was the same score, which means if you're repeating the same score, you could do negative 7 plus negative 7 plus negative 7. But the purpose of multiplication is not to have to add the same thing over and over. That is where we just say negative 7 3 times. Both of these answers will be the same, just to prove it to you. And again, there's no wrong way to do it, however you choose to do it. It's just that if you would have had 20 of these, you wouldn't want to do negative 7, negative 7, negative 7 20 times. But negative 7 plus negative 7 is negative 14, plus another negative 7 is negative 21, just like negative 7 times 3 with one negative is negative 21. So either way, that was the total score for the tournament. But again, you want to make sure you understand when you see this word each, it typically means multiply. Typically. Actually, I can't think of one example where it doesn't mean multiply, but there are some where you have to use division, but typically you're going to be multiplying or doing some version of multiplication whenever you're used to seeing the word each. We also want to make sure we look at some of these tougher problems so we can start getting used to them. This is the order of operations part of it. And so when I look at 35 and I have negative 2 parentheses 5 minus parentheses negative 11 times 3. Remember, these are all types of quiz questions now. Now we want to do our order of operations with realistic things. So that is what I will multiply first. Well, based off what we just learned, 2 times 5 is 10, but there's one negative sign, which makes it a negative 10, and then we copy the rest. The second thing I want to do is multiply the backside here. So negative 10 stays, minus stays. This is where your organization comes in. 11 times 3 is 33, but it is a negative 33. And now we see a problem that we saw last week, which is we have the opposite of 33. Again, 2 flips, which means that this turns positive. And now you have 10 and negative 10 and positive 33. Again, based off our experience, we will subtract these two numbers. And then the bigger number gets the sign, which means it will be positive 23. So again, that is where we're going with this. You might want to be writing these down so you have them, and so you can actually have trust in the fact that you at least have something to study from. Again, it's all about the look of it. So that's what we're here to work on, is to make sure we understand how this works. This is 8 times negative 3, which we know to be negative 24, and then we copy the rest of the stuff that's going on. But this is where things get interesting. Over here, we did 11 times 3, we copy the negative sign, but the thing is, this is what we would know to be a 4 times 5, but it's a negative 4 times 5, which means, yes, we keep the negative 24, but negative 4 times negative 5 is actually a positive 20. And that's where you want to be careful. Again, we are throwing in these negatives, so you want to slow down on your order of operations, because the signs, I'm including the sign because I want to make sure everything's clean, but you want to be careful because we don't really do that on our bell ringer like we are on our distributive property like that. But there's certain times when you'll do it. Just be careful. Again, make sure you develop some sort of system that works for you. But either way, when you do negative 24 plus 20, you subtract because the signs are different, and 24 is a bigger sign, so your answer would just be negative 4. Looking at 37, you have negative 6 times negative 1 times negative 2 minus parentheses negative 5. It's just a lot of numbers. But this is going to require me to do a little bit of work. So again, what I'm going to do is take negative 6 times negative 1, which is 6. Bring down my parentheses negative 2, bring down my negative parentheses negative 5. I'm then going to do 6 times negative 2, which is negative 12, minus parentheses negative 5. Now we have just addition subtraction left, but again, the trick here is we have double negatives right next to each other that we need to change. Once we do that, we understand we're going to subtract, and again, 12 is bigger, so the sign should be negative. That's your addition subtraction rules, which again, you've got to make sure you understand. And then 38, 20 minus parentheses negative 4, parentheses 3, parentheses negative 2. 20 stays, minus stays. We are obviously doing the multiplication first, so that would be negative 12 times, again, bring down your negative 2. So we turned this into 12. This came down as is. Then we have 20 minus parentheses, that would be a positive 24. Well, 20 minus 24, again, 20 minus 24 means it's kind of like this 24 is negative. If you want to write it that way, that's fine. So it means that we subtract, and 24 is bigger, which makes your 4 negative. And that, again, is what you're looking at, making sure that you kind of understand that part. So if you have paper, I hope you do, work out these problems real quick. Pause the video and work these out, and then I'm going to work through them, because the main idea, again, today is the division of real numbers. So that's really what we're here for in the first place. Again, pause the video. I'm going to start in about 5 seconds and then start going over these. 18 divided by negative 2. Again, 18 divided by 2 is 9, but we have one negative, so it'll be negative. That's all the division multiplication is. You do your operation, you count your negatives. 20 divided by 10 is 2, but we have one negative, so it's negative. One sign flip. This is supposed to be negative 16 on top, and that's supposed to be negative 18 on top. So if that helps, go ahead and do that. But negative 16 over 4, 16 divided by 4 is 4. But again, you have 2 negatives, which means it's going to be a positive 4. 18 divided by 6 is 3, but we have 2 negatives, which makes it a positive 3. That's it. 48 divided by 12 is 4. 4 12s fit into 28. The reason I know is because 2 times 4 is 8 and 1 times 4 is 4, so it matches. And we have one negative, which makes it -4. When you see 60 and 5, think about a clock. One, 2, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So on a clock, you have 5-minute segments, and you have 12 of them going around, and that makes a full moment of 60 seconds. So that is your relationship between 12 times 5 is 60, and 60 divided by 5 should therefore be 12. Again, 60, I think about a clock. If I think about a clock and you have a 12 or a 5 there, there is your relationship. 60 divided by 12 is 5. 60 divided by 5 is 12. If you see 5 times 12, you have your 5-minute segments 12 times, which is 60. But anyway, it's 12 with one negative, making it negative. The next one, 0 divided by -4. Well, if you have nothing at all and you're sharing it with 4 people, it's going to be 0. And 0 is neither positive nor negative. It's just 0. There is no such thing as a -0 or +0. It's just a number. And then 79, again, we cannot divide, so we have to switch it first. So 6 sevenths times, parentheses, -3/1, again, the reciprocal of that, which then becomes 18/7 with one negative, which makes it -18/7. So again, make sure you understand all that stuff. This is where we're going. That's the things that we're learning. Just make sure you take it seriously enough to try to get most of it so you make it through this stuff. And outside of that, I'll talk to you later. Have a good day.